The year 2025, a year that many had anticipated with a mix of hope and trepidation. It was a time when the world seemed to be teetering on the edge of a precipice, with the future hanging in a delicate balance. A year heavy with dread. The skies seemed darker, the air thicker with tension. People everywhere felt an unspoken anxiety, a collective unease that permeated every aspect of life. Whispered in churches and debated on news channels, the conversations were filled with speculation and fear as everyone tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding around them. It hung over the world like a shroud, a palpable sense of foreboding that seemed to seep into the very fabric of society, casting long shadows over even the brightest of days. For some, it was a countdown to oblivion, the ticking clock a constant reminder of the impending doom that many believed was inevitable. For others, the dawn of a glorious new age, a time of renewal and rebirth, where the old would give way to the new, and hope would rise from the ashes of despair. For me, Nicholas Rath, it was the year of my foot surgery. A seemingly mundane event in the grand scheme of things, yet it loomed large in my personal narrative. The world outside was a whirlwind of uncertainty. Wars raged, famine gripped entire nations, natural disasters seemed to strike with increasing frequency, leaving devastation in their wake. Rumors of a charismatic leader, promising peace and prosperity, spread like wildfire. His words offered a glimmer of hope to the desperate masses who clung to his promises like a lifeline. His words dripped with honeyed deception, captivating millions. He spoke of unity and progress, of a brighter future just within reach, but there was an unsettling undertone to his rhetoric. But behind the smile I saw a darkness lurking, a chilling resemblance to the antichrist prophesied in the scriptures. His charm was a mask, hiding sinister intentions that only a few could discern. My own anxieties were more terrestrial. While the world grappled with existential threats, my thoughts were consumed by a more immediate concern. A persistent pain in my foot had worsened, necessitating surgery. It was a small thing, yet it felt monumental, a personal crisis amidst global turmoil. The procedure itself, though routine, filled me with a primal fear. The sterile lights of the hospital, the cold steel of the instruments, all seemed to amplify my dread. The thought of anesthesia, of surrendering control, sent shivers down my spine. The idea of being unconscious, vulnerable, was terrifying. It felt like a tiny death, a momentary cessation of self, a brief flirtation with the void. But what if the real death, the rapture, came first? The thought haunted me, a specter that loomed over my nights. As I lay awake at night, the fear gnawing at my soul, I found solace in prayer. It was my anchor, my refuge in the storm. Lord, grant me peace in these uncertain times. Strengthen my faith. Help me to trust in your plan, even when the path ahead is shrouded in darkness. And if it is your will, spare me from the coming darkness. Let your light guide me through the shadows, and bring me safely to the dawn of a new day. The world teetered on the precipice, a fragile balance that seemed ready to tip at any moment. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of impending doom was palpable. Every news bulletin brought fresh horrors, economic collapse, environmental disasters, social unrest. It was as if the very fabric of reality was fraying, and each new headline was another thread being pulled loose. The fabric of society seemed to be unraveling at the seams. Cities that once bustled with life now stood eerily silent, their streets empty and their buildings crumbling. Flags that once symbolized unity now flapped in the wind, tattered and torn. People were scared, desperate for someone to lead them out of the darkness. Faces in the crowd were etched with worry, eyes searching for hope. In public squares and private corners, individuals turned to prayer, seeking solace in their faith. Justin Martin, a young man from a small town in Kansas, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He walked the quiet country roads, his mind heavy with thoughts of the future. On his porch, he sat for hours, contemplating the chaos that had engulfed the world. He had always been a devout Christian, but the escalating chaos shook his faith to its core. The Bible, once a source of comfort, now seemed to hold more questions than answers. In the quiet of the church, he prayed fervently, seeking guidance and strength. The prophecies he had learned about in Sunday school were coming true before his very eyes. The stained glass windows of the old church cast colorful shadows, a stark contrast to the dark reality outside. The pages of the Bible flipped in the wind as if urging him to find the answers within. He spent his days glued to the television, watching the world burn, praying for a sign, for salvation. Each news report was a new chapter in the unfolding nightmare, and he clung to his faith, hoping for a miracle. Across the globe in a bustling London flat, Charles Henry, a renowned historian, felt a similar unease. The city outside his window was alive with activity, but inside, he was consumed by a sense of dread. He had dedicated his life to studying the past, believing that it held the key to understanding the present. Surrounded by ancient texts and artifacts, he sought patterns and lessons that could explain the chaos of the modern world. But nothing in his years of research had prepared him for this. The events unfolding were unprecedented, defying all historical parallels. He felt like a man lost in time, searching for answers in a sea of confusion. The rise of this new world leader, his undeniable charisma and terrifying promises, sent chills down Charles's spine. The leader's speeches were filled with grand visions and ominous threats, captivating the masses while instilling fear in those who saw through the facade. It was like watching history repeat itself, only this time the stakes were infinitely higher. The echoes of past conflicts reverberated through the present, but the scale of the current crisis was unprecedented. The world stood on the brink, and the future was more uncertain than ever. The name on everyone's lips was Donald. Donald Trump, the once disgraced businessman, had risen from the ashes of his shattered empire. His name, once synonymous with failure and scandal, now echoed through the streets and homes of America. People couldn't stop talking about him, whether in hushed whispers or loud debates. He had reinvented himself as a man of the people, a savior come to rescue them from the brink. His transformation was nothing short of miraculous, a phoenix rising from the ashes. He spoke their language, understood their fears, and promised to be their champion. His rallies were massive, his followers fanatical. They gathered in droves, filling stadiums and open fields, waving signs and banners that proclaimed their unwavering support. The energy was palpable, a fervor that seemed to grow with each passing day. They hung on his every word, their faces alight with adoration. Each speech was a performance, a masterclass in rhetoric that left his audience spellbound. They cheered, they clapped, they believed. He promised them security, prosperity, and greatness. And they believed him. They believed that he alone could restore their lost glory, that he alone could make their country great again. But beneath the surface, a darkness stirred. There was something unsettling about his rise, a sense of foreboding that lingered in the air. Whispers of the beast began to circulate, tales of a hidden agenda that threatened to unravel the very fabric of society. His words, though carefully chosen, hinted at a sinister agenda. There was a duality to his speeches, a hidden meaning that only a few could discern. It was as if he spoke in code, a language of power and control that resonated with those who sought to dominate. His promises came with a price, a steep price, their freedom, their very souls. The cost of his vision was not immediately apparent, but it was there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. He spoke of unity, but his vision was one of absolute control. His idea of unity was not one of harmony and cooperation, but of submission and obedience. He sought to mold the nation in his image, to bend it to his will. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a master manipulator preying on their fear and desperation. He knew how to exploit their vulnerabilities, how to turn their hopes and dreams into weapons of control. Justin watched Trump's speeches with growing dread. Each word, each promise felt like a dagger to his heart. He saw the cracks in the facade, the darkness that lay beneath the surface. He saw the signs, the subtle manipulations, the insidious twisting of scripture to serve his own ends. It was a perversion of faith, a corruption of the very principles that Justin held dear. He tried to warn his friends and family, but they dismissed him as a religious fanatic. They couldn't see what he saw, couldn't feel the impending doom that loomed on the horizon. They were blinded by Trump's charisma, seduced by his promises. They were caught in the web of his charm, unable to break free from the spell he had cast. Justin felt a profound sense of isolation, trapped in a world teetering on the brink of madness. He was a lone voice in the wilderness, crying out against the tide of insanity that threatened to engulf them all. Charles Henry, immersed in his research, saw the parallels between Trump and history's greatest tyrants. The cult of personality, the suppression of dissent, the relentless pursuit of power. It was a familiar, terrifying pattern. He knew where this path led, to tyranny, to oppression, to unimaginable suffering. He tried to sound the alarm, writing articles and giving interviews, warning of the danger Trump posed to democracy and freedom. But his words were drowned out by the roar of the crowd, the adoring masses blinded by Trump's false promises. He was branded a traitor, a has-been, an enemy of the people, but Charles refused to be silenced. He knew the truth. and he was determined to expose it, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the world held its breath. The tension was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket of dread. People went about their lives with a sense of forced normalcy, but beneath the surface, fear simmered. The days grew shorter, the nights colder. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something, for the other shoe to drop. In this moment, Nicholas finds himself standing at the edge of an unknown world. The air is thick with anticipation, and every breath feels like a step closer to an inevitable revelation. As he gazes into the distance, the landscape begins to shift and transform, revealing glimpses of a future that feels both familiar and foreign. It's as if he's caught between two realities, each pulling him in different directions. The weight of his journey, the questions that have plagued him, all seem to converge in this singular vision. And in this profound silence, Nicholas realizes that the answers he seeks may not be found in the world he knows, but in the one that lies just beyond his reach. As I lay on the operating table, the hum of machines and the soft murmurs of the surgical team faded into a distant echo. A sense of calm washed over me, a serenity I hadn't felt in years. It was as if in that moment all my worries and fears were being gently lifted away. When I awoke, the world seemed different. The hospital room was eerily silent, and the usual hustle and bustle was nowhere to be found. It felt like I was the only one left behind, a lone survivor in a suddenly deserted world. But then, I remembered the visions, the rapture, the chaos, the fear, and yet here I was, still standing, still breathing. I realized that I had triumphed over my deepest fears, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. With the dawn of a new day, a renewed sense of hope filled my heart. The sun's first rays broke through the darkness, illuminating a path forward. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild and embrace the future with courage and faith. Thanksgiving, 2024. The air was crisp, and the leaves had turned a brilliant shade of orange and red, painting the neighborhood in a warm, inviting hue. Families were busy setting up their Thanksgiving decorations, and the spirit of the holiday was palpable. Children ran around, their laughter mingling with the rustling of leaves while parents prepared for the feast that was to come. The aroma of turkey and stuffing filled the air, wafting through open windows and drawing everyone towards the kitchen. The table was set with care, each dish a testament to the love and effort poured into the meal. There were mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, green bean casserole, and pies of every kind. The kitchen was a hive of activity, with family members bustling about, adding final touches to their culinary creations. Laughter echoed around the table as stories from past Thanksgivings were recounted. The joy was infectious, spreading from one person to the next. Children giggled at the tales of their parents' childhood antics, while the older generation reminisced about the good old days. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated happiness, where the worries of the world seemed to melt away. Family and friends shared stories and gratitude, toasting to health, happiness, and togetherness. The clinking of glasses was a symphony of celebration, each toast a reminder of the bonds that held them together. Conversations flowed freely, from lighthearted banter to deep, meaningful discussions about life and the future. It was a tapestry of human connection, woven with threads of love and understanding. It was a picture of warmth and joy, a scene that could have been plucked from a storybook. The backyard was adorned with string lights, casting a soft golden glow over the gathering. The chill of the evening was kept at bay by the warmth of the company and the hearty food. It was a night to remember, a night where everything felt just right. But beneath the surface, a chill ran down my spine, an unsettling premonition. As the festivities continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was as if a shadow had fallen over the celebration, a dark cloud that threatened to obscure the light. The laughter and joy seemed distant, almost surreal, as a sense of foreboding took hold. As I closed my eyes in prayer, a vision unfolded, vivid and terrifying. It was as if I had been transported to another time, another place. The images were so clear, so real, that I could almost reach out and touch them. I saw a world that was both familiar and alien, a world that had changed in ways I could scarcely comprehend. The year 2025. The skyline was dotted with futuristic buildings, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the desolation that surrounded them. The streets were empty, devoid of the hustle and bustle that once defined them. It was a ghost town, a place where life had once thrived but was now eerily silent. The world was a different place. Nature had begun to reclaim what was once hers, with vines and foliage creeping over abandoned buildings. The air was thick with a sense of loss, of dreams unfulfilled and promises broken. It was a world that had been brought to its knees, struggling to rise again. Gone was the laughter, replaced by screams. Panic and fear had taken hold, driving people to the brink of madness. The once vibrant community was now a place of chaos and despair, where survival was the only goal. The echoes of terror reverberated through the empty streets, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. The warmth of the holiday replaced by the searing heat of destruction. Fires raged unchecked, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The landscape was scarred, a testament to the fury that had been unleashed. Smoke filled the air, choking the life out of everything it touched. It was a scene of utter desolation, a world that had been consumed by its own rage. The news spoke of escalating conflicts, natural disasters of unprecedented scale, and a charismatic leader captivating the globe. The world was on edge, teetering on the brink of collapse. The leader's words were like a siren's call, drawing people in with promises of salvation and hope. But beneath the surface, there was a sense of unease, a feeling that things were not as they seemed. This was not the world I knew. It was a place of nightmares, where the familiar had been twisted into something unrecognizable. The streets I had once walked were now filled with debris and despair. The faces of those I had known were etched with fear and uncertainty. It was a world that had lost its way, struggling to find a path forward. This was a world on the brink. Natural disasters struck with increasing frequency and ferocity, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The very earth seemed to be rebelling, lashing out in anger and frustration. Storms raged, floods swept away entire communities, and tornadoes tore through the landscape with a vengeance. It was as if the world itself was crying out for help, a world bracing for Armageddon. Fear gripped my heart. The sense of impending doom was overwhelming, a weight that pressed down on my chest and made it hard to breathe. I stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out at the stormy sky, and felt a profound sense of helplessness. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. I saw myself a year older, fear etched on my face. Then the vision shifted. The lines on my face were deeper, the worry in my eyes more pronounced. It was a reflection of the toll that the past year had taken, a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. But even in the midst of the fear, there was a glimmer of hope, a spark that refused to be extinguished. I was lying on a cold, sterile table. The room was stark and uninviting, a place devoid of warmth and comfort. The air was filled with the hum of machines, a constant reminder of the clinical nature of my surroundings. I felt a sense of vulnerability, of being at the mercy of forces beyond my control. A surgical lamp glared above. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. The light was blinding, a harsh contrast to the darkness that surrounded me. I could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was to come. It was a moment of reckoning, a test of my strength and resilience, the day of my foot surgery, the culmination of months of pain and uncertainty. As I lay there, I couldn't help but think of the journey that had brought me to this point, the struggles, the setbacks, and the moments of doubt, but also the support, the encouragement, and the unwavering belief that I would come out stronger on the other side. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of hope. The year 2025 arrived like a storm. Global tensions escalated into full-blown war. Earthquakes shattered the land, tsunamis swallowed coastlines, the very foundations of society crumbled. Fear was the new currency. People everywhere sought answers, solace, leadership. And then he emerged, the antichrist, charismatic, persuasive, promising peace and unity. Millions flocked to his banner, blinded by his false promises. He offered a solution, a new world order, but beneath the veneer of peace lurked a sinister agenda, one that chilled me to the bone. His eyes held a strange power, a mesmerizing intensity that could sway the masses. His words dripped with honeyed deception, promising prosperity and security. People were desperate, hungry for hope. They failed to see the darkness that cloaked his true intentions. He spoke of unity, of a world without borders, without religion, a world under his control. Those who resisted, who clung to their faith, were silenced, persecuted. The world had become a dangerous place for believers. The news was a relentless torrent of chaos and despair. Cities burned, countries crumbled. The Antichrist tightened his grip, his power growing with each passing day. The vision showed me glimpses of unimaginable suffering, of people losing everything they held dear. Yet, amidst the darkness I saw flickers of hope, small groups of believers meeting in secret, clinging to their faith. They knew the truth, they recognized the deception, they whispered of the rapture, of Christ's imminent return. Section 5, the day of the procedure. The day of my foot surgery arrived. The sun rose slowly, casting a gentle light over the city, as if trying to calm my nerves. I woke up early, unable to sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. A day that filled me with dread, not because of the procedure, but because of the vision. The vision that had haunted me for weeks, a vision of chaos and despair. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The world outside was a reflection of the chaos in my mind. People rushed about, their faces etched with worry. The streets were crowded, yet there was a sense of isolation, as if everyone was trapped in their own fears. News reports blared about the Antichrist's latest decree. It was all anyone could talk about. The decree had thrown the world into turmoil, and the uncertainty of what was to come weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Fear hung heavy in the air. It was palpable, like a thick fog that enveloped everything. People moved through their day-to-day lives, but there was an underlying tension, a sense that something was about to snap. As I was prepped for surgery, the world seemed to fade away. The hospital was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. It was a place of order and routine, where the focus was on healing and care. The beeping of machines, the hushed voices of nurses, all became distant echoes. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I was watching everything from a distance. The sterile environment of the hospital was almost comforting, a temporary escape from the madness outside. My heart pounded in my chest. Was this it? Was this the moment? The anticipation was almost unbearable. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I knew I had to face this, whatever it was. The procedure was just the beginning. The real challenge was yet to come. Section 6. Asleep on the table. The anesthesiologist smiled reassuringly. "Count backwards from 10, he instructed. As the drug flowed into my veins, a sense of peace washed over me. The fear, the uncertainty, it all began to dissolve. My eyelids fluttered closed. 7, 6, 5. The world outside the operating room ceased to exist. My last conscious thought was a silent prayer, a plea for mercy, a hope for salvation. Then darkness enveloped me. Section 7. Caught up. A tug, a sensation of weightlessness. I opened my eyes, expecting the harsh glare of the surgical lamp. Instead, I saw nothing, or rather everything. I was surrounded by blinding light, yet it didn't hurt. It was warm, comforting. Below me the world shrunk away. I saw the earth, a blue and green sphere receding rapidly. Around me others were being lifted as well. Millions upon millions rising through the clouds. The rapture, it was real. It was happening. Section 8. A world left behind. As we ascended, I looked back at the earth one last time. The chaos I had witnessed, the fear that had gripped the world, it all seemed so distant now, yet a part of me ached for those left behind. The Antichrist's reign had just begun. The true horror was about to be unleashed. But for those who had accepted Christ, there was only peace, joy, and the promise of an eternity spent in his presence. Section 9. A vision's echo. The vision faded, leaving behind a profound sense of urgency and clarity. I was back in my own bed. The remnants of the Thanksgiving feast cleared away. The house was silent, the echoes of laughter and conversation from the night before now, just a memory. The stillness of the early morning was almost surreal, a stark contrast to the vividness of the vision I had just experienced. The world outside, seemingly normal, carried on as if nothing had changed. The birds chirped their morning songs, and the first rays of sunlight began to warm the earth. Yet for me, everything felt different. The vision had left an indelible mark on my soul, but I was forever changed. The vision, so real, so vivid, continued to haunt me. It was not just a dream, it was a revelation, a glimpse into a future that demanded my attention and action. The vision, so real, so vivid, continued to haunt me. Every detail was etched into my mind, the colors, the sounds, the emotions. It was as if I had been transported to another realm, a place where time stood still and the truth was laid bare. It was a warning, a call to action. I knew I couldn't ignore it. The vision had shown me a path, a purpose that I had to fulfill. It was a message of salvation, a call to prepare myself and others for what was to come, to share the message of salvation, to spread the word and awaken those who were still asleep. The vision had given me a mission, a responsibility that I could not take lightly. It was a call to arms, a rallying cry for all who would listen, to prepare myself and others for the day when the trumpet would sound. The day when the skies would open, and we would be caught up in the clouds to meet our Lord in the air. It was a promise, a hope that filled my heart with both anticipation and urgency. The day when we would be caught up in the clouds to meet our Lord in the air. The vision had shown me that this day was not far off, and I had to be ready. We all had to be ready. The time for complacency was over. The vision's echo would guide me and I would follow its call. The operating room hummed with quiet efficiency. Nicholas lay on the cold steel table, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Dr. Lewis, his calm demeanor doing little to soothe Nicholas's nerves, smiled down at him. "Ready for a little nap?" he asked, brandishing a syringe filled with a milky liquid. Nicholas nodded, fear momentarily forgotten as the anesthetic flowed into his vein. He felt a wave of dizziness, then nothing. He was out, sinking into the comforting abyss of unconsciousness. But instead of oblivion, a different sensation took hold. The darkness behind his eyelids bloomed with light, vibrant and alive. He was no longer in the operating room but standing on a familiar street corner, the mundane scene made extraordinary by the ethereal glow bathing everything in its warmth. Confusion gave way to wonder as the familiar cityscape began to shift. Buildings shimmered, their concrete and glass seeming to melt into the air. The sky, once a hazy blue, roared with colors unseen on any earthly palette. People around him gasped, pointing at the swirling vortex of light that had opened up in the heavens, its brilliance rivaling the midday sun. A sound like 1,000 trumpets blown in unison ripped through the air. It was a sound of power, of majesty, of undeniable finality. Nicholas felt a tremor run through him, a primal instinct screaming that something momentous, something terrifying and wonderful was about to occur. The world fractured. Around Nicholas, people began to rise. Some, their faces lit with ecstatic joy, floated effortlessly skyward, drawn towards the blinding light like moths to a flame. Others remained rooted to the spot, their expressions contorted in fear and disbelief as they watched loved ones disappear before their eyes.
Nicholas watched, transfixed, as a young mother desperately clung to her 2 children, their small hands slipping from hers as they were lifted into the air. He saw a businessman, his briefcase clattering to the ground, vanish in the middle of a phone call, his words echoing in the sudden silence. The air was thick with the cries of those left behind, their anguish a stark counterpoint to the triumphant crescendo of the trumpets. He felt an invisible force tugging at him, pulling him upward. He looked down and saw his own hand translucent, fading away. Panic surged through him. He wasn't ready. He had so much left undone, so many things to make right. But the force was relentless, drawing him closer to the blinding light. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for the unknown, for the judgment he feared awaited him.
He opened his eyes to find himself in a vast hall, its dimensions stretching beyond the limits of his perception. A radiant light, too bright to look upon directly, emanated from a throne that seemed carved from the fabric of the universe itself. Before him, countless souls stood in silent anticipation, their faces reflecting a kaleidoscope of emotions, hope, fear, regret, acceptance. A being of unimaginable power and love sat upon the throne, its gaze piercing the heart of every soul present. Nicholas felt naked, his life laid bare before this cosmic judge. He saw every act of kindness, every selfish deed, every moment of doubt and faith replayed before him, not as a condemnation, but as a simple statement of truth. He witnessed the judgment of others. Some welcomed into the embrace of eternity with open arms, others gently guided towards a different path, their faces etched with the bittersweet pain of roads not taken. He saw that judgment was not about punishment, but about the alignment of the soul with its ultimate purpose. The fear that had gripped him gave way to a sense of peace. He found himself in a place of breathtaking beauty, a landscape of rolling hills and crystal-clear rivers bathed in the warm glow of an eternal sunset. Laughter and music filled the air, and the faces around him radiated joy and contentment. He saw people from all walks of life, from every culture and creed, united in their love for the divine. He saw long-lost loved ones reunited, their faces wet with tears of joy. He saw the sick healed, the broken made whole, the lost finally finding their way home. This was heaven, not as a distant reward, but as a vibrant living community. It was a place where every tear was wiped away, every longing fulfilled, every heart overflowing with an incomprehensible love. The operating room hummed with quiet efficiency. Nicholas lay on the cold steel table, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Dr. Lewis, his calm demeanor doing little to soothe Nicholas's nerves, smiled down at him. "Ready for a little nap?" he asked, brandishing a syringe filled with a milky liquid. Nicholas nodded, fear momentarily forgotten as the anesthetic flowed into his vein. He felt a wave of dizziness, then nothing. He was out, sinking into the comforting abyss of unconsciousness. But instead of oblivion, a different sensation took hold. The darkness behind his eyelids bloomed with light, vibrant and alive. He was no longer in the operating room but standing on a familiar street corner, the mundane scene made extraordinary by the ethereal glow bathing everything in its warmth. Confusion gave way to wonder as the familiar cityscape began to shift. Buildings shimmered, their concrete and glass seeming to melt into the air. The sky, once a hazy blue, roared with colors unseen on any earthly palette. People around him gasped, pointing at the swirling vortex of light that had opened up in the heavens, its brilliance rivaling the midday sun. A sound like 1,000 trumpets blown in unison ripped through the air. It was a sound of power, of majesty, of undeniable finality. Nicholas felt a tremor run through him, a primal instinct screaming that something momentous, something terrifying and wonderful was about to occur. The world fractured. Around Nicholas, people began to rise. Some, their faces lit with ecstatic joy, floated effortlessly skyward, drawn towards the blinding light like moths to a flame. Others remained rooted to the spot, their expressions contorted in fear and disbelief as they watched loved ones disappear before their eyes.
Nicholas watched, transfixed, as a young mother desperately clung to her two children, their small hands slipping from hers as they were lifted into the air. He saw a businessman, his briefcase clattering to the ground, vanish in the middle of a phone call, his words echoing in the sudden silence. The air was thick with the cries of those left behind, their anguish a stark counterpoint to the triumphant crescendo of the trumpets. He felt an invisible force tugging at him, pulling him upward. He looked down and saw his own hand translucent, fading away. Panic surged through him. He wasn't ready. He had so much left undone, so many things to make right. But the force was relentless, drawing him closer to the blinding light. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for the unknown, for the judgment he feared awaited him.
He opened his eyes to find himself in a vast hall, its dimensions stretching beyond the limits of his perception. A radiant light, too bright to look upon directly, emanated from a throne that seemed carved from the fabric of the universe itself. Before him, countless souls stood in silent anticipation, their faces reflecting a kaleidoscope of emotions, hope, fear, regret, acceptance. A being of unimaginable power and love sat upon the throne, its gaze piercing the heart of every soul present. Nicholas felt naked, his life laid bare before this cosmic judge. He saw every act of kindness, every selfish deed, every moment of doubt and faith replayed before him, not as a condemnation, but as a simple statement of truth. He witnessed the judgment of others. Some welcomed into the embrace of eternity with open arms, others gently guided towards a different path, their faces etched with the bittersweet pain of roads not taken. He saw that judgment was not about punishment, but about the alignment of the soul with its ultimate purpose. The fear that had gripped him gave way to a sense of peace. He found himself in a place of breathtaking beauty, a landscape of rolling hills and crystal-clear rivers bathed in the warm glow of an eternal sunset. Laughter and music filled the air, and the faces around him radiated joy and contentment. He saw people from all walks of life, from every culture and creed, united in their love for the divine. He saw long-lost loved ones reunited, their faces wet with tears of joy. He saw the sick healed, the broken made whole, the lost finally finding their way home. This was heaven, not as a distant reward, but as a vibrant living community. It was a place where every tear was wiped away, every longing fulfilled, every heart overflowing with an incomprehensible love.
Nicholas Rath drifted off to sleep, the remnants of turkey and pumpkin pie settling in his stomach. He'd spent Thanksgiving with his family, the warmth of their laughter still echoing in his ears. He was scheduled for foot surgery in the morning, a nagging injury from his college football days finally requiring attention. Sleep came easily, but it wasn't the restful slumber he craved. This sleep pulled him down a different path, into a vivid, unsettling dreamscape. Nicholas found himself lying on a cold steel table, the harsh glare of the operating room lights reflecting in his eyes. He tried to sit up, to speak, but his body refused to obey. He felt a strange tingling sensation, a numbness spreading through his limbs. Then he heard it, a low hum, growing louder, morphing into a chorus of whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Fear tightened its grip on him, squeezing the air from his lungs. He was alone, paralyzed, and utterly helpless. Suddenly he was no longer in the operating room. He stood on a desolate street, buildings reduced to rubble, smoke billowing into the crimson sky. The air was thick with the stench of burning metal and decay. Panicked screams pierced the air, a symphony of despair, echoing through the skeletal remains of the city. He recognized his city, his home, now a horrifying tableau of destruction. The whispers intensified, swirling around him, carrying fragmented pleas for mercy and forgiveness. He saw Justin Martin, his old high school rival, on his knees, tears streaming down his face, begging for another chance. Justin had always been arrogant, dismissive of anyone he deemed beneath him. But now, stripped bare of his pride, he was just a terrified man facing judgment. Then there was Brian Lovelace, the neighborhood drunk, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe as he slowly ascended towards the blood-red sky. Nicholas watched, his heart pounding against his ribs as one by one people he knew, people he loved, people he hated were judged and whisked away. His eyes searched frantically for his family. He had to find them, make sure they were safe. Then he saw them, his parents, hand in hand, their faces etched with a serene peace he'd never witnessed before. Tears welled up in his eyes, a mixture of relief and a profound sense of loss. They looked at him, their expressions filled with love and acceptance. Before they too began to rise, he wanted to call out to them, to beg them to stay, but his voice was trapped in his throat. As quickly as it began, the chaos subsided. The whispers faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The sky returned to its normal hue, the air clear and crisp. Nicholas stood alone amidst the ruins, the weight of what he had witnessed pressing down on him like a physical burden. He finally understood. This wasn't a dream, it was a vision, a glimpse into the terrifying yet strangely beautiful reality of the rapture and the judgment that followed. Then a new vista opened before him. He saw fields of vibrant green bathed in golden sunlight. Crystal clear rivers flowed through the landscape, and the air vibrated with the music of unseen birds. He saw his grandparents, their faces aglow with joy, beckoning him forward. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see a man with eyes filled with kindness and a smile that radiated warmth. "Don't be afraid, Nicholas," the man said, his voice a soothing balm to his ravaged soul. "This is only the beginning." He woke with a gasp, his heart hammering in his chest, the sheets damp with sweat. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. His surgery, it was today. For a moment he lay there, caught between the horror of the vision and the mundane reality of his life. The line between the two blurred, the fear and wonder lingering like the taste of a potent dream. He reached for his phone, a new sense of urgency gripping him. He had calls to make, apologies to offer, a life to mend. The vision, whether real or imagined, had changed him irrevocably. He'd been given a second chance, a glimpse of what awaited both the righteous and the wicked. It was a responsibility he didn't take lightly. As he dialed his brother's number, a single thought echoed in his mind. There was still time to choose forgiveness, time to embrace love, time to truly live.
Thanksgiving night, family gathered, laughter filled the air, but a shadow lurked in my heart. I was scheduled for foot surgery soon. Fear gnawed at me. That night, sleep offered no escape. A vision seized me, vivid, real. The end times unfolded before my eyes. Fear turned to awe. The sky split open. A trumpet blast shook the earth. Believers, bathed in light, rose to meet the Lord. I saw their faces, etched with joy and peace. This was the rapture, the beginning of the end. I watched as people vanished from the Thanksgiving table. Empty chairs stood as silent witnesses. Utter chaos gripped those left behind. They had not chosen faith. Then, I saw myself. Bathed in light, I was lifted upward. Fear vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. Below, the world descended into chaos. Above, I saw a multitude beyond counting. They sang praises to God. This was the promise fulfilled. The faithful gathered home. A glimpse of heaven's glory. The vision faded. I awoke, my heart pounding. The room was silent, my family still asleep. The experience felt real, more than just a dream. Fear of surgery seemed trivial now. I had witnessed the power and glory of God. How could I doubt His plan, even in my own small struggles? My upcoming surgery, once a source of anxiety, now felt like a small ripple in the vast ocean of God's plan. He was in control, of this I was certain. But the vision wasn't all peace and light. I saw the aftermath of the rapture. The earth ravaged by storms and earthquakes. Fires raged, consuming all in their path. The antichrist rose to power, deceiving the masses. Those left behind faced terrible persecution. Their cries for mercy echoed in my ears. The vision was a stark reminder. Time is short. We must choose faith now, in this life. For after the rapture, it will be too late. The consequences, eternal. Yet even in the midst of devastation, I saw glimmers of hope. Small groups of believers resisted the Antichrist, their faith unwavering. They faced persecution with courage, their eyes fixed on heaven. Their example was a testament to the power of faith. Even in the darkest of times, hope remained, God's love, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. These faithful few, they were the true heroes. They understood the cost of following Christ, yet they never wavered. Their example, a call to action for us all. The vision left an indelible mark on my soul. The fear of surgery was gone, replaced by a profound sense of urgency. We are living in the end times. Of this I have no doubt. But the vision also brought a message of hope. God is in control. He has promised to return for His faithful followers. We must cling to that promise, share it with the world. This is my plea to you. Turn to Christ. Embrace His love and forgiveness. Do not wait for the final trumpet call. The time for decision is now. I went into surgery with a calm heart. The vision had given me a new perspective. My anxieties seemed insignificant compared to the eternal destiny that awaited us all. The surgery was a success. As I recovered, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My mission now was clear: to share the message of hope and redemption. Whatever trials we face in this life, let us face them with courage and faith, for we know that our true home awaits us, a place of eternal peace and joy. The anesthetics were supposed to bring oblivion. Instead, they opened a door. There I was, prepped for a simple bunionectomy, when the vision hit me. The operating room, with its sterile steel and bright lights, dissolved. My aching foot, a distant memory. In its place, a panorama of the end times. It began subtly. A news report on the television in the corner. The anchorman's face creased with concern. A tremor, they called it. Somewhere distant, an earthquake. Then the murmurings in the hallway, nurses whispering, their faces pale. Something wasn't right. The world was tilting on its axis. And then, it happened. The first disappearance. A young nurse, checking my chart, vanished with a soft pop, leaving only her scrubs behind, fluttering to the floor. The room plunged into chaos. The attending physician, his eyes wide with disbelief, froze, his hand reaching out to where the nurse had stood moments before. This was no ordinary tremor. This was the rapture. The fear was palpable, a living thing snaking its way around the room, squeezing the air from my lungs. It was real. The rapture was happening. Right here, right now, the end had begun. The hospital, once a place of healing, became a stage for unimaginable horror. Panicked cries ripped through the air as more people vanished. Patients disappeared from their beds, leaving behind bewildered visitors. Doctors and nurses, their faces etched with terror, dissolved into thin air, their last words echoing in the sterile silence. Outside, the city descended into madness. Car horns blared in a symphony of chaos as driverless vehicles collided in screeching metal carnage. Planes, stripped of their pilots, spiraled downwards, leaving trails of fire and smoke against the darkening sky. The news, flickering on the lone television in the waiting area, showed scenes of global pandemonium, empty pulpits, deserted schools, abandoned homes. The world as we knew it was gone. The faithful, the chosen, had been swept away to safety, leaving behind a remnant to face the darkness that was to come. And I, a sinner awaiting a routine surgery, was one of them, left behind. The initial shock gave way to a chilling realization. Those who vanished, they were the lucky ones. They had been deemed worthy, their faith strong enough to grant them passage. But what of those left behind? What of me? Was my faith not strong enough? Had I not lived a life pleasing to God? The air crackled with fear and uncertainty. Those who remained, a motley crew of the unprepared and the unbelieving, wandered the streets in a daze. Some wept openly, mourning vanished loved ones. Others railed against the heavens, their cries laced with anger and disbelief. The fabric of society, already stretched thin by division and distrust, ripped apart completely. The whispers started, soft at first, then growing louder, bolder, whispers of conspiracy, of government experiments gone wrong, of alien abductions, anything but the truth, anything but the terrifying reality of the rapture. The disappearances were only the beginning. The earth itself seemed to convulse in agony, a reflection of the turmoil that had gripped humanity. Earthquakes, once isolated incidents, became commonplace, ripping through cities and swallowing buildings whole. The ground beneath our feet, once a source of stability, was now a constant reminder of our precarious existence. Volcanoes, dormant for centuries, roared back to life, spewing molten lava and choking ash into the sky. The sun, once a source of warmth and light, was now obscured by a perpetual haze, casting the world in an eerie, twilight gloom. The oceans too were not spared, whipped into a frenzy by monstrous storms that battered coastlines and swallowed entire islands. Nature, once a source of awe and wonder, was now a weapon unleashed, punishing those left behind for their lack of faith. Each tremor, each eruption, each terrifying storm was a stark reminder of the divine judgment that had been wrought upon the earth. Section 5, The Rise of the Beast, A World in Shadows. From the ashes of chaos rose a figure promising order, a man of charisma and cunning who capitalized on the world's fear and despair. This was the Antichrist, the son of perdition prophesied in the scriptures, a wolf in sheep's clothing offering false hope and demanding blind obedience. He spoke of unity and healing, of rebuilding a shattered world. But his words rang hollow, masking a sinister agenda. His promises of peace were a smokescreen for a reign of terror, a new world order built on fear and oppression. His followers, blinded by desperation and seduced by his promises, flocked to him, eager to embrace his twisted vision for humanity. The world, once a tapestry of diverse cultures and beliefs, was now being reshaped in his image. Freedoms were eroded, dissent silenced. The very air we breathed grew thick with suspicion and paranoia. The stage was set for the final act of mankind's rebellion against God. Lost and adrift in this new world order, I found solace in the most unexpected of places, a small, dilapidated bookstore tucked away on a forgotten side street. Its proprietor, a man named Elijah, became my confidant, my guide through the darkness. His eyes, filled with a wisdom that transcended the chaos surrounding us, spoke of unwavering faith. He shared his knowledge freely, guiding me through the scriptures, helping me to understand the apocalyptic events unfolding around us. He spoke of the tribulation, the 7 years of hardship and suffering that would test the faith of even the most devout. He spoke of the mark of the beast, a symbol of allegiance to the Antichrist that would seal the fate of those who accepted it. Elijah's bookstore became my sanctuary, a beacon of hope in a world spiraling towards oblivion. His faith, unwavering in the face of unimaginable darkness, became my anchor, reminding me that even in the midst of despair, God's love remained. The Antichrist's grip tightened. His image, beamed across every television screen and plastered on every street corner, became a constant, inescapable presence. He promised prosperity, security, even eternal life, but the price of his gifts was absolute obedience, absolute devotion. And then came the mark, a symbol of allegiance, a declaration of loyalty to the Antichrist and a rejection of God. It started subtly at first, a microchip implanted under the skin, a necessary measure for participation in the New World Order. It allowed access to food, to shelter, to employment. To refuse the mark was to choose exclusion, to become an outcast in a society that no longer tolerated dissent. The choice was clear, and yet, it tore at the very fabric of humanity. Families were divided, friendships shattered. Those who refused the mark were branded as enemies of the state, hunted down and persecuted for their beliefs. The world had become a battleground, not of nations or ideologies, but of souls. The line in the sand had been drawn. On one side stood those who had chosen to serve the Antichrist, their hearts hardened by fear and seduced by promises of earthly power. On the other side stood a remnant of believers, their faith tested, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that their true allegiance lay with a higher power. The persecution was relentless. Churches were burned, scriptures confiscated, believers driven underground, forced to worship in secret. But even in the darkest of times, their faith flickered like a candle in the wind, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The battle for souls raged on, not with swords and shields, but with whispers of hope and acts of defiance. Every life saved, every soul brought to Christ, was a victory against the encroaching darkness. The stakes had never been higher, for this was a battle not just for the future of humanity, but for eternity itself. My vision faded, the echoes of the future receding like the tide. I awoke groggily, the sterile scent of the recovery room filling my nostrils. My foot throbbed, a dull ache reminding me that I was back in the land of the living. But the world I had glimpsed, the horrors I had witnessed, continued to haunt me. The rapture was coming, of that I had no doubt. But it was not a message of despair but a call to action. We have been given a precious gift time to repent, time to seek forgiveness, time to prepare our hearts for the tumultuous days ahead. This is not the end but the beginning of a new era, an era of faith and courage, an era where the faithful will be called upon to stand firm in their beliefs, to be beacons of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. The choice is ours. Will we heed the warning and embrace the light, or will we be swept away by the tide of fear and uncertainty? The time to choose is now, for tomorrow may be too late.
The turkey lay cooling on the table, a golden brown monument to a feast shared with loved ones. John felt heavy, drowsy. The tryptophan, the wine, the warmth of the day, all conspired to pull him under. His eyelids fluttered closed. John drifted into a deep sleep. Thanksgiving, a day for thanks, became a day of dreams. He didn't know it yet, but this was no ordinary dream. This was a vision, terrifying and vivid. John's mind swam in a hazy sea of nothingness. He felt disconnected from his body, a strange, floating sensation washing over him. He tried to open his eyes, to speak, to move. Panic welled up inside him as he realized he was trapped. He was aware, but utterly powerless. His mind raced, trying to grasp what was happening. Had he eaten something bad? Was this some kind of allergic reaction? Fear spiraled into terror as he felt himself slipping further away. John was lost in a dark void, his last conscious thought a desperate plea for help. John found himself looking down at a hospital bed. He saw his own body lying there, pale and still. Doctors and nurses rushed around, their faces etched with concern. He tried to call out to them, to tell them he was still here, but his voice was silent. The medical staff couldn't see him, couldn't hear him. He was a ghost, a wisp of consciousness, tethered to the physical world by a thread. The scene around him flickered, and he was pulled away from the hospital, soaring through a vortex of swirling colors and blinding light. Fear gave way to wonder as he found himself looking down on the world. He saw cities sprawling beneath him, vast forests stretching towards the horizon and the blue curve of the earth. It was beautiful, breathtaking, and terrifying. He was alone, adrift in the vastness of existence. The beauty was short-lived. The world below began to writhe and convulse. Earthquakes ripped through cities, swallowing buildings whole. Tsunamis roared ashore, wiping away coastal towns in an instant. Volcanoes erupted, spewing fire and ash into the sky. The sky itself seemed to tear open, unleashing storms of biblical proportions. This is wrong, John thought, his disembodied voice echoing in the void. This isn't real, it can't be real. But deep down he knew this was no dream. This was a nightmare come to life. As John watched the apocalypse unfold, a figure coalesced beside him. It was Matthew, an old friend from college. John hadn't seen Matthew in years, but he recognized him instantly. Matthew looked the same, yet different. His eyes shone with an eerie light, and his face held a strange sense of peace. It was the peace of acceptance, of understanding. "Matthew, is that really you?" John's voice echoed strangely in the void. Matthew turned, a sad smile gracing his lips. "John, I can't believe it, you two. What is this? Where are we?" Matthew's smile faded. "This is it, John. It's the end, the rapture. The righteous have been taken, and we weren't deemed worthy." John struggled to comprehend. The rapture, like in the Bible? He had always dismissed it as a fairy tale, a story to scare children, but the evidence was right there in front of him. The world was ending, and millions, maybe billions, were gone. Well, Section 4, the world breaks. Panic and terror gripped the hearts of those left behind. The lucky ones were gone, vanished in an instant. The rest faced a world spiraling into chaos. John watched in horror as cities descended into anarchy. Looting, riots, and violence erupted everywhere. The thin veneer of civilization had been stripped away, revealing the raw, primal instincts lurking beneath. Wars raged across the globe, fueled by desperation and fear. Nuclear fire lit up the sky, turning day into night. John had always believed in humanity's potential for good, but now he saw the darkness within. In the face of ultimate destruction, all sense of morality, of compassion seemed to evaporate. Then, a figure of immense power rose from the ashes. The antichrist. He promised order amidst the chaos, salvation from the suffering, but his promises were built on lies, on manipulation, on the enslavement of the human spirit. John watched as people flocked to his banner, desperate for hope, unaware of the true cost. Section 5, chosen and left behind. John saw faces he recognized amidst the chaos below. There was his neighbor Sarah, a devout Christian, being lifted into the sky, a look of pure joy on her face. He saw his brother Mark, a man who scoffed at religion, left standing on a street corner, his face contorted in fear and confusion. The arbitrary nature of it all filled him with a profound sense of injustice. He watched as his friend David, a doctor known for his compassion and selflessness, tended to the wounded in a makeshift hospital, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But he also saw politicians and religious leaders, people who claimed to be moral authorities, using the chaos to seize power, their true nature exposed for all to see. The world was a tapestry of salvation and damnation, of hope and despair, and John, suspended between heaven and earth, could only watch as the drama unfolded beneath him. He felt a profound sense of helplessness, of being unable to influence the events he was witnessing. Section 6, beacons in the dark. Even in the heart of the apocalypse, John saw flickers of hope. He saw ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of courage and compassion, a young woman shielding a group of children from a hail of gunfire, an old man sharing his meager food rations with a starving family, a soldier sacrificing himself to save his comrades. These acts of heroism, small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things, shone all the brighter against the backdrop of despair. They were a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the capacity for love, for compassion, for sacrifice. John realized that salvation, true salvation, wasn't about being chosen or left behind. It wasn't about religious dogma or blind faith. It was about the choices you made, the actions you took, the way you treated your fellow human beings. It was about finding the strength to be kind, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty.
The world went quiet. An eerie silence enveloped me, replacing the frantic beeping of machines. My eyes, heavy with exhaustion, fluttered shut. A gentle warmth spread through my body, erasing the pain that had become my constant companion. Then I saw it. A brilliant white light, pure and inviting. It beckoned me closer. I felt myself being drawn towards the light, a sense of peace washing over me. Fears and regrets, once so heavy, seemed to dissolve. In their place bloomed a profound sense of tranquility, a homecoming I had never known. As I moved closer to the light, I felt an overwhelming love, a love that knew no bounds. It was a love so pure, so powerful, it could only be divine. I had a sense of being awaited, of finally coming home after a long and arduous journey. The pull of the light intensified, and with it, a sense of overwhelming joy. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was about to enter a realm of unimaginable beauty and love. The light enveloped me, and I found myself in a place of unimaginable beauty. Lush green meadows stretched as far as the eye could see, bathed in the golden glow of a sun that never set. Crystal clear rivers flowed through the landscape, their waters sparkling like 1,000 diamonds. Above me, the sky was a vibrant tapestry of colors, more vivid than any I had ever seen. I saw figures in the distance, their forms radiating warmth and light. They moved with a grace I had never witnessed, their laughter echoing like music through the air. As I drew closer, I recognized some of them. Loved ones, long gone from my world, smiled and reached out to me. Their eyes shone with an inner light, reflecting the boundless love that permeated this place. There was no pain here, no sorrow, no fear, only pure, unadulterated joy. This was heaven, a realm of eternal bliss, and I was home. Yet, even as I reveled in this newfound paradise, a part of me ached, an ache for those I had left behind, for those who had not yet found their way to this place of peace. The joy of heaven was tempered by a profound sadness for those I had left behind. I saw my mother, her face etched with worry, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I saw my brother, his shoulders slumped with grief, his face a mask of disbelief. I wanted to reach out to them, to comfort them, to tell them I was okay. But a barrier separated us, a chasm between the living and those who had passed.
I was caught between two worlds, unable to fully embrace the joy of heaven while the pain of those I loved lingered in my heart. The love I felt for them intensified, a bittersweet ache that mirrored the joy and sorrow I felt simultaneously.
I realized then that heaven was not a place of complete detachment from earthly bonds. The love we carry in our hearts transcends the boundaries of life and death. The pain of those we love resonates within us, even in the afterlife. It was a heavy burden to bear, the knowledge that my loved ones grieved while I found peace. My mother's tears were a constant ache in my newfound peace. I watched her, her frail shoulders shaking with sobs, her hand clutching a photograph of us. The picture held the memory of a happier time, a time before illness had ravaged my body and stolen my laughter. Her grief was a palpable thing, a heavy cloud that threatened to overshadow the ethereal beauty surrounding me.
Then there was my brother. His face a mixture of disbelief and anger. He paced back and forth in his room, his voice rough with unshed tears as he raged against the unfairness of it all. He wouldn't accept that I was gone.
His doubt was a sharp pang in my chest, a reminder of the faith he had lost, the faith I now embraced with every fiber of my being. The contrast between their pain and my newfound peace was stark, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of love. I understood then that my journey wasn't over. I had been given a second chance, not just to experience the glory of heaven, but to help those I left behind find their way back to faith, to hope, to each other. The whispers started subtly, gentle nudges, urging me to share my story, to tell the world what I had seen and felt. I resisted at first, unsure how to articulate the profound experience of heaven, afraid that my words wouldn't do it justice. But the whispers persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. Images flashed before my eyes, people lost and hurting, searching for meaning in a world that seemed increasingly chaotic and cold. I saw their pain, their loneliness, their desperation for something more, something beyond the material world. I knew then that I couldn't stay silent. My experience, however difficult it might be to articulate, held a message of hope, a message the world desperately needed to hear. The whispers became a chorus, a symphony of voices urging me to share my story. It was a call to action, a divine mission to spread the message of love, hope, and the enduring power of faith. And so, I began to write, my words flowing onto the page, each one a testament to the divine encounter that had changed me forever. Sharing my experience wasn't easy. The skepticism, the doubt, the outright disbelief I encountered were like daggers to my heart. People questioned my sanity, dismissed my story as a hallucination, a desperate attempt to cope with the trauma of what I had been through.
Their words stung, but I refused to be silenced. The burden of knowledge, the weight of my experience was heavy to bear.
I was met with resistance from those closest to me. My mother, lost in her grief, couldn't bear to hear my story. My brother, hardened by his skepticism, dismissed it as delusional ramblings. Their reactions hurt more than any words from strangers.
But I pressed on, driven by the whispers of heaven, by the faces of those I had seen lost and hurting, searching for meaning. I knew that my story, however unbelievable it might seem, had the power to heal, to inspire, to offer hope where there was none. Slowly, tentatively, people started to listen. A flicker of recognition in their eyes, a softening of their expressions, told me that my words were resonating. They saw in my story a glimmer of hope, a possibility they had never dared to believe in before. Their questions, once laced with skepticism, became filled with a yearning for understanding, for connection. I spoke of the boundless love I had felt in heaven, the overwhelming sense of peace, the joy of reuniting with loved ones who had passed. I shared the message that death was not the end, but a transition to a realm of unimaginable beauty and love. With each story, each encounter, I planted seeds of faith, hoping they would take root and blossom. It wasn't about convincing anyone, but about planting a seed of possibility. A seed that whispered of a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. A love that offered solace in times of grief and hope in the face of despair. As I shared my story, I began to find a sense of peace. The guilt of surviving, the ache for those I'd left behind gradually eased. I realized that my experience wasn't meant to torment me, but to empower me. It was a gift, a responsibility to share the message of hope and love with a world that so desperately needed it.
My mission became clear: to help others find their way back to faith, to encourage them to embrace love and compassion, to remind them that they were not alone. I spoke at churches, community centers, even on street corners. My words carried on the wind, reaching hearts hungry for meaning.
The more I shared my experience, the more I understood the true meaning of heaven. It wasn't just a place we went to after death. It was a state of being, a way of living our lives with love, kindness, and compassion. It was about building bridges of understanding, fostering communities of support, and extending a helping hand to those in need. My experience was a divine encounter, a life-altering event that had shaken me to my core. But it was also a gift, a calling to spread a message of hope and love in a world often shrouded in darkness. It taught me the importance of faith, the power of community, and the transformative potential of redemption. The world is a different place now, touched by the light of my experience. People are more open to discussing spirituality, to seeking connections beyond the material world. There's a renewed sense of hope, a belief that even in the darkest of times, love and faith can guide us towards a brighter tomorrow. My journey is far from over. Every day is a new opportunity to share my story, to plant seeds of faith, and to remind people that even in the face of adversity, there is always hope. For heaven is not a distant destination, but a choice we make each day to live with love, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit.